1968 was a momentous year. Maybe not for most of you because you weren't born yet. I was in the seminary 2 years before ordination, and it was also the year that Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy were assassinated. It was also the year for the 1968 Olympics. And in the 200-meter dash, there were two young black men from the United States who were really expected to dominate that event, and they did. But in a surprising move, a young Australian white man took second place. He set an Australian record that has still never been beaten. And the man who ended up winning that 200-meter race, coming in first, he set a world's record. But the real drama of that 200-meter dash race at the Olympics was in the awards ceremony. The two black men in the first and third places, the winners of the gold and bronze medals, were barefoot to emphasize the inequality of society and how so many people of color are poor. They each raised a fist to show the inequality that people of color have experienced for so long. Surprisingly, though, the Australian, a young man named Peter Norman, joined them in their protest. He learned of what was going on, and he asked if he too could participate. The athletes there had a project called the Olympic Project for Human Rights, and he asked if he could wear one of their badges to show that he supported them and their cause. All three of those athletes were punished. The two Americans were immediately dismissed from the Olympic team and sent home. And the Australian, the greatest sprinter that Australia has ever produced, was banned from participating in professional athletics in Australia. Years later, a statue commemorating that event on the winner's stand at the Olympics was recreated in a statue on the grounds of San Jose State University in California in the United States. It's ironic that on this feast of Corpus Christi, we cannot receive the body and blood of Christ. We cannot even gather as the body of Christ. We normally think of those two ways of the body of Christ, receiving the bread and wine turned into his body and blood, but all of us becoming his body, his presence in the world. There's a third way we can think of the body of Christ too, though. In the second reading for Corpus Christi Sunday, St. Paul says, "The bread that we break, is it not a participation in the body of Christ?" If you turn that phrase around, maybe he's saying participating in the body of Christ, that makes the Eucharist real. That makes Jesus present in his body. Participation in the body of Christ, that's what all the protests and demonstrations about the killing of George Floyd, all those protests in the United States and all over the world, they are about the body of Christ. The body of Christ has been abused. People of color have been mistreated, have been denied their rights, have been persecuted, have been humiliated, have even been killed. And for too long, and in so many ways, white society has just looked the other way. Or they have said, it's just a few bad apples who are causing all the problems. But really, it's not a problem of a few bad individuals. The problems are that society has created conditions in which people are treated unequally, and society has allowed that to continue. But now people are saying enough is enough. Now it's the time to stop it. Maybe now it's the time for us to step forward also, like Peter Norman did in 1968 at that award ceremony. We can add our voices and our actions to demand for equality for all people. What can we do? Well, first, I think we need to educate ourselves about the problems, about systemic racism, about the discrimination and suffering that people of color have suffered for so long. We do that by reading books, by watching videos, particularly something like watching a video. Watch the video and then think, what if that were me? What if if I am lying on the ground and some policeman has his knee on my neck? Try to get a feeling for that. And when you have questions, ask about it, but do your homework first. Try to study the problem. A second thing we can do is to discuss the issues, especially discuss, if you can, with people of color, with people who have actually had that experience. The point is, listen more, talk less. Really hear the feelings of the people who have suffered injustice. And if you have a relationship where you can gently talk to people of color, be careful. Don't expect them to say, "Oh, I'm so happy you asked." People of color have been dealing with this literally for generations. They have been patient. They have been oppressed for so long. Many of them are really tired. A third thing you can do, don't express shock and outrage when something like the killing of George Floyd takes first. Don't say, "I can't imagine how that could happen in our day and age." People in the United States, people of color, they say, "This has been happening for 400 years to us. You just haven't paid attention. You haven't listened to us." A fourth thing we can do is to look for ways to act. It's time for us to step up onto the platform like Peter Norman did. Join action groups, take part in demonstrations, write letters, participate in social media. Most of all, vote for the right people. A fifth thing we can do, sometimes closer to home, challenge the people who repeat racist myths. Well, all black people are that way. That's not true. Or people who tell racist jokes. Challenge them on that. That's not the right thing to say. Even somebody in your family, if your Uncle Harry is a real racist, don't just say, "Oh, that's just the way Harry is. Nobody can change him." Try to change him. You don't have to get into a big argument, but just say, "Harry, I'd like to offer you a different point of view." A sixth thing that we can do is to pray. Pray that all of God's children will be respected and loved equally. Ultimately, it's important that we do something, no matter how small. First, we listen to the people most affected by systemic injustice, and we educate ourselves. And then we use the resources that are out there to learn how to make a difference, to make this moment a turning point. This is an ongoing struggle. It's not just a trending issue on social media. When these protests fade from the news, and they will, we need to be just as concerned in the future about inequality and injustice as we are now.